Hi, how are you?
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you
Very
for
well.
thank you for coming in. So I have to come clean. Despite his huge presence in India and Pakistan, I was unaware of Saadat Hasan Manto before I saw the film. But I know from many artists and writers, including Salman Rushdie, he was a really big influence. So
I have to complain actually to the Western world
sure,
that you never get to know enough about what's happening in our part of the
I
world.
believe that is the
We know a lot more about you. So
that is literally the story of the Western world. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So that's why I think it's even more significant that a film like this comes out to the whole world and we share. Because I think if he was a European or an American or a Canadian, a film would have already been made on him.
What made him so important?
The fact he's so relevant today. He talks about, going beyond the identities that divide us, whether it's based on race or religion or nationality. So he really invokes that humanity that I think all of us are slowly forgetting. Also, he was a big champion of freedom of expression. Like you mentioned, that he was tried for obscenity or obscene writing 6 times.
Really?
Yes, and he fought his own cases. So he was a real champion, and I think that's happening in many parts of the world where artists and writers and filmmakers are being stifled and not allowed to tell their stories. So I think more than one reasons Manto seems very, very relevant. Definitely for India and South Asia, but I think for around the world as well.
Do you remember the first time you read his work?
In college, but I only read his short stories. He's really known as a short story writer, but it was only in 2012, which is his centenary celebration, that a lot more started being written about him, and I started reading his essays. And that told me much more about the man behind those writings and not just the stories. And I thought, wow, he's just as fascinating as his stories.
What's fascinating? Like, what was it that spoke to you personally about his writing?
Well, the fact he was so blunt. I mean, his compulsion to tell the truth kept sort of jeopardizing his family. He really loved his family, unlike Mavericks, whom history has kind of forgiven for their innumerable muses. He really loved his wife. He loved his 3 daughters. He wanted to give them a good life, but he was just so compelled to tell the truth. And because of that, publishers didn't want to publish his writing. The cases were on him. He became an alcoholic because he took the partition very, very personally. When these epic events happen where, it's the biggest mass migration in the world till date, and people don't know about it, 14 million people. And yet his stories are very intimate and personal. So I think just the fact he was such a misfit, and there's so many such Manto-esque people around the world in every era, and we just haven't given them their due. And, we've just thought of them as strange people, or they're alcoholics, they're misfit, they're misunderstood hugely. So I think it's also a celebration of all those who have that Manto-esque quality.
Well, I also read, and this might be on the same track, that you were thinking a lot about your father while you were
Yes,
making this
you've
film.
done
Is
your
that right?
research.
I have somehow.
You're absolutely right. I think I grew up with a very Manto-esque person. So
Your father was a painter, right? Jatin
He's
Das?
a painter.
He's a painter, right?
Yeah, he's a painter, and he draws bare figures. And as a kid, people used to say, "Why does your father draw these nudes?" And I was embarrassed, and I would go to him, and he said, "They are not nudes. They are bare figures beyond time and space." And he would just be so blunt, tell people off, and people thought he was really a strange man. And he's almost not right for this world. And I thought, wow, I can imagine how difficult it must have been to live with a Manto kind of a person. So I think that was also a personal reason that gave me insights about him, like maybe I wouldn't have got had I not had a father like that.
Here's what I find fascinating about how you made this film. So you bring this very human side of this, what I can tell is a very mythic figure, Saadat Hasan Manto. But though he was in radio plays, he was in film,
Film scripts, yeah.
there's no surviving footage of him, right?
It's really sad.
So is that freeing for you, or is that also frustrating for you?
In the beginning, it was frustrating because when I met the family in Lahore, I told them, I'm going to find his voice and his, some video clipping somewhere. And I kind of felt like I owed it to them for all the support they were giving me.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to do it for the film. And then I just realized there was no recording at that time. Radio, you just did live. This was like early 40s. So I couldn't find anything. So we just had these 10, 15 photographs and then these anecdotal things. And he was very prolific. Even though he died at 42, he'd written tons of stuff. And slowly it was actually freeing, because then you didn't have to fit into a certain image. And someone said, oh, but he had a very squeaky voice. But these were all just
Yeah.
sort of mythical stories.
Well, was it challenging to depict the kind of darker side of him? The alcoholism. Given that you had talked to the family about it.
Well, I mean, Manto in his own writing says this again and again, that, beauty does not mean everything good. Like, every good person has shadows, and every person that we think is terrible can be redeemed. And he would always say that, those who go after God, I'll seek Satan. And, he was like really trying to be provocative. Those who go for light, I like the, labyrinth of the darkness and things like that. So he always talked about the fact that if you want to show a true picture of something, you've got to show the warts and blemishes. So I think Manto would have been fine. And, he would have, in fact, liked me to show all his grey sides and dark sides. And I think the family understands that too.
You're kind of channeling him in your depiction of him. So I want to play some more music from the film.
Lovely.
Take a listen to this.
बोल के लब आजाद है तेरे बोल जुबान अब तक तेरी है
बोल के लब आजाद है तेरे बोल जुबान अब तक तेरी है.
So that's Rashid Khan and Vijay Shah. The song they're singing is called Bo Ki Lab Azad Hai. You're hearing that song in the film Manto, directed by my guest today, Nandita Das. Some of the lyrics translate to, speak, your lips are free, speak, your tongue is your own. I feel like there's a connection there.
Absolutely, and that's why the choice of this poetry. He was this poetry is written by Faiz Ahmed Faiz, who in fact was a great poet of the time. For the longest time, he was much more famous also than Manto, because Manto people sort of read in hiding, whereas Faiz is someone, he was like a revolutionary poet. So it's like he's calling out for people to speak up, and I felt that was the essence of the film. And that's why the end of the film, I just wanted it to go on the end credits to kind of leave the audience with that thought that let's bring out our fearlessness and our convictions.
This whole time, Nandita, you've been speaking about in the present tense. I mean, this is
I know.
This is
supposed to be a period film, right?
It's supposed to be a period film. It's supposed to be a historical film, but I can tell it's so modern for you. It speaks to right now. Tell me more about that.
Absolutely. You caught that, and you caught me, because I think I did the film to respond to what's happening today, not just with the nostalgia of the past. So I wanted to create a context for you and the audience in a way that you get transported to that time, and then you begin to realize, my God, nothing's changed. In these 70 years, we're exactly there. We're still grappling with the same issues, and that's what it's about. And that's why, for me, it is a very contemporary film.
Do you feel like you were channeling Manto yourself?
I think so. I've never used that term, and I'm going to plagiarize it, but I think I am. I'm trying to. I do feel I'm sort of, in a mystical way, part of that legacy.
And also, I think that, like Manto, there's been pushback against your work historically. I mean, you starred in Deepa Mehta's film Fire in '96. So that was one of the first Bollywood films to depict homosexual love. There were protests in India against the film.
Probably the only one to talk about really lesbian love, especially.
People were storming cinemas.
Yeah, breaking them down. I had a police outside my house for a month. My parents were getting quite scared.
What's that like for you?
Well, it's been 22 years, and just last week, homosexuality has been decriminalized.
Yeah.
So, seldom do you see a film actually impacting the public discourse in such tangible ways. And I think Fire did. It suddenly sort of brought it out in the public domain where people were talking about it, something we pushed under the carpet for the longest time. And I shaved my head for a film called Water, so couldn't be part of it by the end of it. So yeah, I have suffered the attacks on freedom of expression. So it's also a very personal thing. Even with Firak, my first film, there was a lot of political pressure.
How did you find out that gay sex, the homosexual love, had been decriminalized in India?
I was in India. I was in Bombay just leaving for Toronto, and it was everywhere. And in fact, we were doing press for Manto, and every journalist who came and said, I know you've been championing this LGBTQ issue, and tell me about it. So I'm like, wow, it's fantastic. It was long overdue. It was such an archaic law. It should have gone many, many years ago. But, better late than never.
So about an hour ago, right, on the show, Gina Davis was on, and you also spoke at the rally, the Share Her Journey rally.
Which was fantastic.
At TIFF. I want to play you a clip of you speaking there.
Oh, God.
Take a listen.
For better or for worse, I'm constantly reminded I'm a woman. I've just directed a film, so I'm asked, so how does it feel to be a woman director? And I tell them, I have no idea how it feels to be a male director.
So that's my guest, Nandita, speaking at the Share Her Journey rally this weekend. I like how you went, oh God, when I said I was going to play it for you.
I was like, oh, but I didn't have any notes and I was cursing myself. I never prepare. And I kind of keep winging it, which is not a good thing.
You and I have a lot in common.
It looks like, actually. Let's meet up for coffee next time when I'm here.
I'll get you a jean jacket. It'll be great. Later at the end of that speech, you talk about, what is it like to be a female director? Well, I don't know what it's like to be a male director. But I will say about maybe 5-10 minutes after that, you do say you started to own that term, woman director.
It was a journey for me as well, because here I was trying to say, why do we always have to remind ourselves that I'm a woman? When I'm working, I'm just a director and all of that. But lately, because of all the conversations we've been having, and I was wondering, I was like, maybe I should own it, considering I'm constantly saying there should be more women directors, there need to be more women behind the camera. Why am I distancing from it? Why am I not saying, yes, I'm a woman director? The fact I'm a woman must have had some impact on my gaze in the way I look at things, just as my other identities have had an impact, my upbringing, my nationality, where I've grown up, etc. So that was a personal journey for me, and I thought I should share it with others, that people might be able to relate to that.
There's a call to arms here that I haven't mentioned yet. I don't know if a call to arms is the right term, but there's a calling out.
I like the term anyways.
That I haven't mentioned yet. I want to close off this way. So I read in an article, someone said, if you could ask Manto one question, you would ask him, why are the writers and artists of today so fearful of speaking up?
True. I think a lot of them are just self-censoring. It's not even that someone else is censoring. We have an official censor board, which is strange enough. Then you have self-proclaimed custodians of culture who tell you what you should watch, what you should wear, what you should read. And then there are artists and filmmakers and everyone who's kind of saying, oh, let me not tread on that, because that might offend somebody. What if I get jailed?
Yeah.
And it's happening. Rationalists, activists, journalists are literally being put behind bar for speaking up. So we are living in those times.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Likewise, Tom.
Congratulations on the film.
Thank you. Please spread the good word.